Ultros is unlike any other Metroidvania. Though it begins normal enough, the player character, Ouija, wakes up in a verdant field, vegetation gently swaying in the breeze while birds chirp and flies buzz by. After a bit of exploring, Ouija happens upon a bloody, sword-skewered corpse. She arms herself, which summons the spirit of Wallet, who complains about being stuck in an endless attempt to escape this sarcophagus and asks you to find a nearby shaman bastard who sustains the illusion and messes with the continuum, preventing anyone from leaving. Ghosts are always going on about something. Wallet asks Ouija to smash that bastard up real good, which she seems more than capable of doing with her ice-cold demeanor and the way she wields a blade. Not to mention those sick trainer. On the way to that shaman bastard, Ouija introduces a few enemies' insides to the outside, solves a couple light but pleasant platforming puzzles, grows used to her very satisfying momentum-based moveset, finds an inaccessible area that will no doubt require a later ability, invests in some upgrades, and carves new shortcuts that loop back in on the main path before taking down a giant slake moth with hot pink beakers peeking out its back. So far, so Metroidvania. It's not until about an hour into the game that Ultros hard pivots from the familiar, after Ouija meets a friendly gardener named Gardener, who swears he previously planted a tree just nearby. Since Ouija found a seed earlier, she plants one for him that immediately sprouts some unsettling fruit, though the tree isn't tall enough to get to the higher ledge. She then meets Qualia, who practically has a meltdown after Ouija finds a little guy that lets her double jump. What's the big deal, lady? Every Metroidvania has one. Ouija follows after Qualia, who seemingly leaves behind a trail of dark thoughts as she questions her purpose. She is the chalice. Wasn't she supposed to be chosen by the extractor? Which leads Ouija to that shaman bastard, a snooze in an incubator. This being a video game, Ouija does what comes naturally. Ouija follows a stream of souls, dark soul, that leads her toward a giant, roiling mass, pregnant with undulating energy. The extractor floats over, releasing more of the shadowy spirits that are quickly absorbed by the mass, and Ouija along with them. She comes to on another plane of existence, the sky darkened with malicious intent as Qualia summons forth Ultros, a newborn cosmic horror beyond our comprehension, indifferent as it engulfs the ship with grasping tendrils that then spread across the known universe. Then Ouija wakes up, back in the verdant field, vegetation gently swaying in the breeze while birds chirp and flies buzz by. No sword, no upgrades, no shortcuts, no extractor, which means no double jump. Sins of the genre. The slate has been wiped clean. Ouija is back to square one. Ultros is unlike any other Metroidvania because it isn't a Metroidvania. It's a roguelite.
Gabby J!
Yay!
There's an ancient tale, thousands of years old, of the Buddha and the terrorist. One day, while walking through the forest, the Buddha was set upon by a fearsome terrorist, clothes caked with blood, hair matted with soil and sweat, wearing a necklace made of the ragged, severed fingers of his many victims from which he received his name, Angulimala. Angulimala believed that if his necklace grew to contain 1,000 horrific digits, no one would hold power over him, that he would rule the world. What luck! He thought as he leveled his sword menacingly towards the Buddha. 10 more fingers for my collection. It's disheartening at first to have your progress erased, especially if you took time to unlock as many abilities as possible before the unexpected existential birth. But Ultros is not a roguelike. wherein the game state is completely reset at the start of a new run. It's a roguelite, which means certain progress does carry over from loop to loop. It's just on the player to figure out what has and how to make more do likewise. Or else, what would be the point of upgrading your character at all? Enemies don't simply die in Ultros. They explode, burst, erupt in colorful fountains of slippery viscera. Some of the first creatures you meet are these floating jellyfish that ping-pong ball against the narrow passage walls before literally spilling their guts onto the dirt, that you then hungrily wolf down. This raises a couple nutrition stats, nutrition being the currency used to unlock upgrades on Ouija's skill tree whenever you save your game. And so the pleasant loop goes: stomp, scarf, sleep, upgrade. But the deeper into the skill tree Ouija is, the higher and more varied the nutrition cost becomes. She can't possibly house down that much protein, not without some serious indoor plumbing issues. This is where perfect variety and prime grade meat comes into play. As explained later by this crimson-colored Bloodborne cosplayer, there is an art to the kill. When defeated, enemies leave behind either a slab of prime meat, some battered body parts, or simply a massive, unrecognizable bloody pulp. Grade A prime beef provides the most nutrition by far, whereas battered bits are good for a quick health boost, and bloody pulp is, well, not much good for anything. The way to dine on prime every time is to never attack an enemy with the same move twice, which encourages the player to constantly mix it up with combo strings, counter strikes, air juggles, and ground pounds. As your enemies get tougher, as they're able to absorb more and more hits while dishing out as good as they take, it becomes harder to attain that perfect variety. And so, stomp, scarf, sleep, upgrade, stomp harder. Fully half of the skill tree is dedicated to new attacks, whereas the other half unlocks more passive abilities, like being able to use remains as compost or hiding your presence from enemies to peacefully pass by. Boring! Combat in Ultros is fun, even if half the time it kind of feels like you're picking on defenseless creatures for kicks, but hey, I gotta get my blue bar up for that next sweet skill, so it's Law of the Jungle, baby! And, like any good Metroidvania, there's no better example of how fun combat can be than the boss fights. What happens when Ouija, with her well-developed freak-scarfing skill tree, smashes up the next shaman bastard she comes across? After all, she's got to smash all 7 shamans in order to break their hold over the illusion and escape the sarcophagus, if escape is even possible. First, Ouija acquires a new ability for the extractor, like a really handy booster rocket that draws power from certain plants and liquids, or a pair of gardening shears, and a shovel. Wow, that's really lame. Then, it's back to Oblivion we go. Hard gains lost as Ouija wakes up again with all of her upgrades downgraded. Unless, that is, you find one of these. Mnemonic Mycelium allows you to lock down any one skill, ensuring it'll remain unlocked at the start of the next loop. Peppered throughout the map, these little brain bolts scratch that classic Metroidvania exploration itch while lessening the pain of subsequent roguelike resets, while also negating the need to unlock lesser skills you no longer want to bother with, since you can lock down a branch much further into the tree and go straight for the good stuff. The only issue is, many of these mycelia are in plain sight, but just out of reach, which is where seeds come in. Time moves strangely on the sarcophagus. After the first reset, that tree you planted for Gardener is still there. Not only that, but the tree has grown further, sprouting a crown that Ouija can climb. When the loop is reset, time actually moves forward for any flora Ouija bothered to botany, each one instantly flourishing with charming pips and yops. Then, depending on where they're planted, they may blossom into something bigger and stranger as time goes by. these new plant-based pathways feel like solving mini puzzles every time, since it's completely up to the player what to plant where, and happens so frequently that the puzzle pleasure nodes in my brain near constantly purred like a sunbeamed kitten. But plants serve a dual purpose, as they also bear fruit. Lots of fruit. So much fruit, in fact, that it makes killing animals for nutrition almost unnecessary. And that's when it started to dawn on me. Ultros isn't actually a roguelike. It's a gardening sim. Angulimala had every intention of striking down the Buddha, of severing his fingers one by one and weaving them into his terrible necklace. But as he raised his sword, he realized the Buddha was unafraid. Not just unafraid, the Buddha had entered the woods with the intention of meeting Angulimala, as he was warned of the dreaded terrorist by a neighboring village where many of his victims, their fingers now adorning his neck, once lived. What makes you so fearless that you are able to come to me, knowing that I may kill you? I am the awakened one. From which sleep are you awakened? From the sleep of separation, of ignorance, of anguish, the sleep of wishing to control others, to have power over others. So we're about to enter spoiler territory, starting out light with stuff that the game does guide you towards about halfway through a playthrough, then moving on to the heavy bits that the game definitely doesn't tell you and that you should figure out for yourself to get the full effect of what Ultros is aiming for. So if this video piqued your interest and you're thinking about giving Ultros a shot,
now's the fucking time
to click away and play it for yourself. But
yay,
maybe leave a like and subscribe on your way out. It really does help the channel. Thanks. As you work your way further into the sarcophagus, as you smash up more shaman bastards and get more extractor mods and gain new abilities and explore new territories and lock in more upgrades and are sucked into oblivion time and time again, there's a moment where your entire perception of the game world shifts. Down, way down at the bottom of the sarcophagus, where the floor is broken away and Ouija ventures out into space, she encounters a nest of these little wisps that follow her with an umbilical cord-like connection that trails behind until she touches a flower bud, causing it to instantly bloom and act as a new anchor point for the little creatures. Ouija continues to thread the wisps from bud to bud until she approaches one of the many statues standing sentinel by a locked door. They too have flower buds, and when Ouija manages to get the wisps over to one, suddenly, you have a new goal in mind: get wisps to more statues, while an unbroken rainbow-colored line helpfully displays the living network extent. So, you lead the wisps on further, bud to bud, plant to plant, as anything previously grown also sprouts buds under certain conditions, bursting to sudden life as the wisps happily attach until you reach a distance too wide for the wisps to make it across, the umbilical cord stretched thinner and thinner until it snaps. Then, you remember something Gardner told you hours ago. If you feed an animal some food, not only will it fill their bellies and make them docile, with cute little hearts floating up out of their heads, but they'll also fertilize the surrounding soil with their, creating a brand new plant bed for your seeds. So you start feeding the animals, making new friends, encouraging them to, then planting new seeds, all while learning that these creatures have their own little personality quirks, like how some are herbivores, some are carnivores, others will take whatever they can get. And then there's this sick freak that only eats pre-masticated meals. Or how these big boys will tip over if you stand on their heads. Or how these little fly guys will fight over food. So actually it's better if you take one of them out first and let the other eat in peace. So But there are areas where the network needs to expand yet don't have any animals. How can a seed be planted without soil to grow? Then you remember something else Gardner said. Deep underground, there are nests that merely need a path back to the surface for life to thrive once again. Luckily, you have that lame shovel, allowing you to dig down. The shovel isn't lame, by the way. It's actually great. I love it. Dig down, find nests, and bring animals to the area on the next loop. So now, you're making lots of new friends, feeding and fertilizing, extending the network further and further, unlocking doors, connecting to shamans even, and even to Ultros itself, when a single thought eventually crosses your mind. If I can feed and befriend the little guys, can I make nice with the big guys too? And that's when Ultros plays its hand. When its greater theme starts to come into light. It's the moment the player realizes that this game, with its fun combat, and half a skill tree's worth of unlockable attacks, and Devil May Cry-ish style ranking system that encourages you not only to kill, but to look good. While doing so, it can be played non-violently. It's been guiding you towards this realization the whole time. Every single enemy, each and every boss monster, no matter how large and intimidating and alien, they can be reached with a little understanding. Angulimala lowered his sword, struggling to comprehend how an unarmed man was so unafraid. Through conversation, the Buddha helped the terrorist identify the root of his anger and discover the wellspring of his pain, transforming Angulimala, a terrorist believed beyond redemption, into Ahimsaka, the non-violent one, who went on to live a long and peaceful life, atoning for his past while helping everyone in need he came across. Ultros, in its own way, is a retelling of the Buddha and the terrorist, of a person defined by violence, guided by another, to discover the simple joy in helping others and become one with the ineffable energy of life. Only, you're not the Buddha. You're the terrorist. Ultros is a game about human connection, about coming to understand the many NPCs you come across, what drives them, what holds them back, whether that be self-doubt, or self-loathing, or narrow-mindedness, or an inability to stop and smell the roses, and to simply help. I think this is the point of El Huervo's psychedelic, aggressively alien art style, who you may remember from another indie game you might have heard of. It's not just trippy for trippy's sake. It's meant to disorient the player with neon bright backgrounds and repulsive insect-like designs and weird eyeballs dotted all over the place to make the sarcophagus feel utterly inscrutable. But the longer you stay, the further you explore, the more familiar these locations become until finally it dawns on you the ultimate truth that this strange and unusual place, it's a day spa. Sure, the sarcophagus may or may not have been a temple at one point with an incomprehensible demon at the center of it, but somehow over time, it became a destination resort, a cruise ship. And think about how wonderfully thematic that is. A vacation is where you go to get away, to recharge the batteries, to forget all your troubles, to leave the world behind. In a word, to disconnect. What happens when you close yourself off to others? Ultros is so uniquely alien because it's so genuinely human. Through its intricate interlocking systems, animals, nests, seeds, plants, food, wisps, and NPCs, Ultros subtly guides the player to not only become familiar with the flora and the fauna of this bizarre realm, but to care for them, connect with them. This is also why the game's a sanded down roguelite. It's not because Ultros wants to challenge you. It's not about working towards that perfect run. It's because Ultros wants you to revisit your garden, see how it's grown, tend to it a little each time, until by the end you feel like Elsa with her shoes off, becoming one with nature, talking really slow, being denied your truth by corporate overlords. Even the amazing music and sound design by ambient artist Rat Vader is meant to impart feelings of nature and reflection, using the real-life soundscapes and musical instruments of the Peruvian rainforest to get the player as close to the natural world as possible. Ultros is the inversion of every Metroid that ends with Samus blowing up whole planets as she sails triumphantly off into the horizon. Nowhere is this more vivid than with Ultros itself, a Cthulhu-like cosmic horror, able to consume our entire universe once it is born into existence. A being so great, so terrible, so remote that it won't even notice our presence as it snuffs us out, like so much jellyfish carelessly swatted aside. But even Ultros can be connected to if you're willing to put in the work. And it is work, several hours worth of work, but that's how it should be. Choosing violence is easy, simple, direct, but doing what's right? Ultros is unlike any other Metroidvania, not because it's a roguelite or because it's a gardening sim, but because it's a holistic experience. It's the rare game that leverages each and every one of its fascinating mechanics and music and art to express themes both beautiful and complex without showing or telling, but through gameplay. It's one of the best Metroidvanias I've ever played, and I hope one day you play it too.